I'm just wondering where everyone else is. Francis can't make it. Martin can't make it. Martin's on a boat right now on his way to Virgin. So he's heading back to his, I guess, his mother's house, but he's sailing right at the moment. Um, so Martin can't make it. Ian is at the airport probably now. He's probably on his way to Paris. Um, Francis
Ben,
is stuck in traffic. Um, I'm not sure where
Ben
you.
is late. Ben is late. Ben
Well,
will be
yeah, Ben said he
sometime.
was going to be late. That's fine. I talked to Iman yesterday. I had a very poor internet connection with her. I'm not sure where she is. So, we'll just give it a few more minutes.
Yes.
I mean, today and last week are going to be two very, very important meetings. And I'm going to repeat a lot of what I've been doing just because they're so important. And I'm going to repeat them uh, through other meetings. Um, have either of you done any of the breathing exercise that I talked about last week? Breathing in with all three centers, so head, body, and feelings. Breathing in with the cerebral hemispheres, the cerebellum and spine, and the solar plexus all at the same time. Breathing in the word I with all three parts, and then breathing out the word am. And as we breathe out, imagine that a part of the air stays within us. And as we breathe out, imagining that we are breathing out a gray, foggy waste. It's very simple to explain, but it's actually a very complex inner exercise. You have to be able to maintain an awareness of your head brain, your body brain, and your feeling brain simultaneously together. And when you breathe in, try to bring your awareness to your head brain, body brain, and feeling brain as you breathe in. And then as you breathe out, you try to maintain that awareness of your head brain, body brain, and feeling brain. And as you breathe out, you imagine that a part of it stays within you. And then, as Mr. Gurdjieff said, you just imagine part of it stays within you. Where it goes, what it does, that's its own business. Our job is just to imagine that part of it stays within us. And then as we breathe out, as well as imagining part of it stays within us, imagine that we are breathing out a gray, foggy waste. I've actually been working all week. I initially started it as a recording where I did 15-minute relaxation and then followed by instructions for it. And I didn't really like it. I recorded it twice. I didn't like what I did. And I'm turning it into more of a similar exercise that I did for the holy affirming, holy denying, the exercises through the bones and whatever. So it's going to be on the little screen with the dialogue below. But it takes a while to do those things with pictures of people breathing and whatnot. Very important exercise. This is how we feed our being. This is how we grow our being at the higher level. If we do not have these substances already present within us, the higher needs to blend with the lower. So we've got to have these tiny particles of higher substances within us. And the way we get them is through this breathing exercise. I'd always said to people before that J.G. Bennett said that the way we absorb these higher energies, these higher, more refined particles was through conscious breathing. And through conscious breathing, that meant breathing while self-remembering, which to me, self-remembering is an act of the head, body, and feelings. But for a lot of people, it requires a lot of effort, a lot of practice, a lot of awareness to be able to breathe into these three dimensions simultaneously. Just talking about the fact that breathing in these higher particles requires an act of conscious breathing, I realized, upon uncovering the actual text of the of the not experiment, the text of the exercise, that conscious breathing is a little bit more complex. And while these instructions are very simple, breathing in I and breathing out am, breathing in I with all three parts, breathing out am with all three parts, breathing in I with the head, body, and feeling brains, breathing out am with the head, body, and feeling brains, breathing in I with the cerebral hemispheres, the cerebellum and spine, and the solar plexus, and breathing out am with the cerebral hemispheres, cerebellum, and solar plexus. And then, again, as I said earlier, breathing in I, and then as we breathe out am, we imagine a part of the air stays within us. And then as we breathe out am, we imagine breathing out a gray, foggy waste. I did this quite a bit last Monday, and I noticed such a profound effect on Monday night. It was one of the most powerful things that I have experienced in a long time, just consciously doing this breathing exercise. I'm going to, let me pull up. This is my rendition of the exercise. But I went through it last week. Hopefully Ben will join us. So Martin can't join us. Francis can't join us. Ian can't join us. So I guess Aman must be having problems. Maybe the problems with the computer yesterday were on her end. I'm not sure. But I have real problems trying to talk to her. I kept on cutting out. So this is the dialogue or the text that I'm going to be putting in the video, the little sort of square video that I'm creating. Break the tempo of ordinary life before doing this exercise by spending 15 minutes relaxing as deeply as you can. Now repeat the following out loud or in your mind. I am now about to begin this exercise, which I have been fortunate enough to learn from Mr. Gurdjieff, and which will enable me, with the aid of conscious labor, to coat higher bodies in myself from active elements in the air I breathe. And bring your whole attention to this exercise. Breathe normally and do not alter the natural rhythm of your breathing. Breathe in I and breathe out am with all three parts. Breathe in I and breathe out am with mind, body, and feelings. Breathe in I and breathe out am with your cerebral hemispheres, cerebellum and spine, and solar plexus. And when breathing out, imagine a part of the air stays in you and flows to the corresponding place. Where it flows, how it flows, that is its own business. You must only feel that a part remains in you. Do not hold your breath, just breathe in and out naturally. And when breathing out, imagine something flows out like a gray fog. And take a corresponding position that mobilizes an inner tension and causes your centers to work together for this aim. Doing this exercise properly with conscious labor and breathing the small property into your blood will make big results possible. Breathing normally without altering the natural rhythm of your breath. Now repeat the following out loud or in your mind. I am now about to begin this exercise with full attention. I will draw in my breath, saying I, and sensing the whole of myself. I wish very much to do this in order that I may digest air. And these are quotes directly of Mr. Gurdjieff, and this is just me having retaken his exercise and put it into a form, and this is the text that I'm going to use on the video that I'm creating. So breathe in I and breathe out am with all three parts. Breathe in I and breathe out am with mind, body, and feelings. Breathe in I and breathe out am with your cerebral hemispheres, cerebellum and spine, and solar plexus. Breathe in I and breathe out am. And when breathing out, imagine a part of the air stays within you and flows to the corresponding place. Where it flows, how it flows, that is its own business. You must only feel that a part remains in you. Now repeat the following out loud or in your mind. I wish to keep this substance for myself. And then breathe in I, breathe out am, and when breathing out, imagine something flows out like a gray fog, breathing normally without altering the natural rhythm of your breath. Now, what I've just read accounts for like 2 or 3 minutes of the video that I'm creating. I want to go and use my daughter's Macintosh and record the vocals and then put it together and put pictures of people breathing together. But then for the next 6 or 7 minutes, the text that I'm going to have and the part that I'm going to have is the very last bit I have here on the screen. Breathe in I, breathe out am with mind, body, and feelings. Breathe in I, and as you breathe out am, imagine a part stays within you and flows to the corresponding place. Breathe in I, and as you breathe out am, imagine a gray fog flows out. So very profound, very important exercise. It would have taken, my estimate is probably 10 to 20 years off my journey if I had known how to do this back in 1981, and if I had done this for at least 10 minutes every day. I did do versions of conscious breathing. I did have an awareness of my breathing. When I was first taught, the very first exercise I was taught was by Dr. Christopher Holmes, who was a professor of psychology at York University in Toronto. And he got the class. It was in class, January 5th, 1981, the day my life changed. And he said, I want you to become aware of what you can see. Then I want you to become aware of what you can hear. Then I want you to be aware of what you can smell and the taste in your mouth. And then he said, become aware of your body. And I actually did it from the top down to the bottom. When I know now it should be from the bottom up to the top, but become aware of your body. Try to be aware of as much of your body as you can. And then finish by trying to breathe in a feeling of joy. So as I did that, and as I breathed in the feeling of joy, it was like a light went on for me. And I had never experienced as a profound state in my life up until that point. It was amazing. When I went through that experience, I knew my life had changed. My magnetic center had been activated. I couldn't put it into these words, except for the fact that I knew my life had changed. I went home, talked to my girlfriend, told her she should break up with me because I wasn't going to be the person that I had told her I was going to be. I was going to pursue this mystical life. I didn't quite put it in those words, but I did tell her she should break up with me. And instead we got married, had 3 children, and then we broke up 20 years later. But the consciously looking, listening, smelling, tasting, and then adding the level of the awareness of the physical body, and then becoming aware and breathing in the joyful emotion, and breathing in. I was actually activating all three brains at the same time. But I never used the affirmations, and I never imagined that part of the air was flowing to the corresponding places, and I never imagined breathing out a gray, foggy waste. So if I had known this exercise back then and woken up in the morning when I was still in a relaxed, collected state, so I didn't have to do the 15 minutes of relaxation, waking up in that tranquil state, and if I had done that breathing exercise for 10 minutes, I would have pulled more of those higher particles that are necessary for the process of alchemical transformation within us. I'm just going to pull something else up. Just give me a second.
Would it be nice to use some kind of a essence by breathing? This is a
Would you be
composer.
some
Excuse
kind
me.
of can you repeat that?
No, I'm holding it right now.
Oh,
37
yeah.
smell
Okay,
plants.
you're talking about essential oils.
Okay.
To
Okay.
be honest, I have a feeling that just as clean an air as we can is the best.
All right. Thank you.
You know, in Beelzebub Tales to his grandson, Mr. Gurdjieff makes a comment about how unnatural it really is to live, say, on the 22nd floor, which I once did, of a tall building. He talked about the fact that the air way up is different than the air and what accumulates on the ground. He didn't really go into the specifications, but I assume that being on the ground, breathing air naturally. Probably it would be better if we were in the middle of a jungle where the plants were actually producing the oxygen that we were breathing right there, or maybe even on a beach, but wherever we are to breathe. Whereas if we breathe in the essential oils, I'm not sure.
Maybe not. Yeah.
I think we lost Reggie. There he is, back again. So I'm just going to pull this up just a second to kind of explain this in a. It's right here. Yeah. So, oops. Let me see if I. So the alchemy of human transformation. Mechanical man is on the left, the state of waking sleep. Mindful man, or man who is self-aware or personally conscious, is in the middle. And conscious man, or awake man, is on the right. And on this diagram, where I have the pluses along the diagram, this came from chapter 9 of In Search of the Miraculous. In that chapter, Mr. Gurdjieff uses the word carbon for those white plus signs. It's the active element. And he says that these elements have to already be present within our system for this for this transformation to occur. So for instance, on the very left side, DO 768, that comes in as the food we eat. So whenever you eat any food, it comes in at that level, and it meets with a substance within us at the level of 192. J.G. Bennett says that this is the saliva in our mouth. I think the man is joining us. Then when it moves into our stomach, as Ray 384, it meets with the gastric juices already present in our stomach. And then it leads to me 192, which is on the level of air, and the octave of air has to come in at that same point as a resonance to help it move up. This one on the left is what naturally occurs. This is all mechanical. But as we move over to the center, it isn't. And if we look at the difference, for the octave of air, the middle octave, there are these two higher carbons that should already be present within ourselves that we need in order to transform air higher. And then also we need to have these two higher elements already present within ourselves in order for the octave of impressions to begin to transform higher. If we go over to the level of objective consciousness, we realize that there's a whole new carbon that has been added to the octave of food. There's another, actually the octave of air is complete. We've got that carbon within us. And then the octave of impressions, a new carbon is needed. So these new carbons that are not present in mechanical man are somehow present in the air that we breathe. And so through doing this breathing process, by breathing in and imagining or calling in, breathing in with the I, with our head, body, and feeling brain, and then imagining part of it stays within us as we breathe out with our head, body, and feeling brain, and imagining breathing out a gray, foggy waste, brings in the center diagram some of these higher particles, and in the right-hand diagram some of these higher particles into our being, so that they are present within us, so that we can then engage in this alchemical transformation. It's this, to me, this is so important, and this exercise is so simple, and yet it is so difficult. Iman, I guess her microphone is off, but it's showing her on the screen.
Yeah.
Whoops, I lost myself for a second.
Yeah, hi, I'm sorry I was late, but the power was off. I'm at my sister's.
Oh, okay.
And the power went off for 1 hour, so
oh no.
it just happened to be on a few minutes ago.
Ian is on his way to Paris right now. Francis is stuck in traffic. Martin's on a boat somewhere. I don't know what sea it would be. I'm going to Virgin. So they can't make it. Ben said he would be a few minutes late. I'm not sure where he is. So I've just been talking about the exercise that I did last week. But it's all here on the recording. The importance of the air that we breathe. Now today, I'm going to talk about something different. I'm just going to pull this up so I can quote from it. Just give me a second to arrange. Some people actually think this is a more important exercise than the first. This exercise that I'm going to talk about today is called the collected state. And Mr. Gurdjieff said that this is the beginning of self-remembering. So this is a very, very important exercise. Now, this exercise appears in the transcripts of the wartime meetings. I'm not sure, I don't think it appears in the G.I. Gurdjieff Paris meetings, 1943, but there are other meetings, other notes that are circulating online, which are transcripts of Paris wartime meetings from 1938 to 1946. Except the version that most people have, this exercise has been intentionally removed from it. I actually found a hint of the exercise in a text online, which was not in the copy that I have. And I sent a message to a friend who has a deep, intricate knowledge of all the texts and the various things involved. And he actually had a copy of these meeting notes that did not have the exercise censored out. So the people, whoever produced the version that they released online, purposefully censored this exercise. But I have the exercise. I've got the full, complete text of this exercise. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to pull up a document that I have, which I will share with everyone. It's called The Collected State. The Paris Meeting Notes, 1943. We have this exercise. I am collected. I am present. I'm going to move down. I'm going to just skip the exercise right now. What I'm going to read here, this is Solange Clostrers, who met Mr. Gurdjieff as a young woman during wartime Paris, and she eventually became one of the most accomplished movements instructors. So she was a young woman, late teens, early 20s, when she came across Mr. Gurdjieff. One day, I told G. Gurdjieff, and this is all translated from French, that I felt a lot of energy after movements class, and that it disappeared. I could not keep it. I added that also in life, certain circumstances gave me energy, and that likewise I would lose it. After a silence, G replied, gently, quietly, that the human being is surrounded by an atmosphere, as is the earth, that through thoughts and emotions, we let our energy go or we lose it. He told me that this atmosphere differed in extent for each person. It was like a continuity of one's body, like an outer limit. He said that I should practice sensing the space around me, to feel my atmosphere as a continuation of my presence, to sense its limit without coming out of it, without going beyond it. Learn to keep my energy within the boundary of my own atmosphere. Not to let this boundary be affected by anything on the outside, and not to let anything enter into it. G. Gurdjieff continued, saying that if you let your energy go in imagination, emotions, you identify with these, your energy is lost. It is necessary to learn not to let this energy be drawn out of you. That I must learn to think and feel without identifying. That habitual thoughts are not a real reflection, but associations and emotions with which we identify. Consequently, the energy is absorbed and lost. That the development of attention, of consciousness is made with the energy of the being, that we must learn to use it to develop our being to the full and not to waste it. Incredible words there. The next one I'm going to read comes from Gurdjieff and the Woman of the Rope. And this is just a partial explanation of this exercise. Emanations. This is Mr. Gurdjieff. Emanations. Everything has emanations. Earth, dog, that bottle, me, you. Emanations are automatic, must go out from us, from every separate part, from all total. Part go out automatically from every living thing. We each one surrounded by atmosphere of our emanations. Some scientific apparatus can see these emanations. We each have atmosphere around us all the time. Dog also bottle, also earth. Now then, think of your leg. And he was actually giving these instructions to Mrs. Gordon, the person that Fritz Peters really had a problem with. And she had been with him for a long time. And he was, even though the other ladies of the rope were with him, he was giving this exercise to her. Now then, think of your leg. Emanations go out from leg also. Try now, think. This is first step. This is first thing can do so that you do not die like a dog, but can become part of God. Good formulation. Born like dog, die part of God is not good. When I tell you this beginning thing you can do, tonight your most important moment in life, more important for you than God, more important than your birth. Why? Because you born like dog. After tonight, you have responsibility. Because I tell you this, your leg, emanations go out. Now you think, not all emanations go out of leg. Save some of them. You accumulate emanations in your leg, not let all go out. Let some for necessary reasons, but you accumulate some also. You begin accumulate in you some of the emanations which go out automatically. This is what I tell you. This is a beginning to not be dog, but part of God. After this, I tell you more. There are 7 ways to accumulate emanations. This is first. To do this, you must remember yourself, but you cannot do without asking me questions. Think of questions. I give you 12 hours. You meet tomorrow morning, must ask 7 questions before can understand what I mean. 7 questions must ask, otherwise you not understand. And then later on, first at beginning, do it when not in life, when lie in bed, sit in chair. Important not to make mistake at beginning, not occupied with outside life. Important, do it first outside of life, then when sure that doing it right, do it in life. Can make mistake at beginning, and that can be dangerous. Then you only have psychopathic attention, mental center attention, not totality of memory sensing attention. Later must do in life, must do all in life, not be like monks isolated from life. So he says that, here, this is not a mental exercise. It's something that we should do with our head, our body, and our feelings, our head brain, body brain, feeling brain, the cerebral hemispheres, the cerebellum and spine, and the solar plexus. If we practice this as a one-centered exercise, it will make us psychopaths. So Gurdjieff, views from the real world, so that your nature can assimilate in calmness the results deposited in you. After that, rest 10 or 15 minutes in a collected state. That is to say, do not allow thought or feeling or organic instinct to pass outside the limit of the atmosphere of the body. Rest contained so that your nature can assimilate in calmness the results deposited in you, otherwise would be lost in vain. So if you've been paying attention to the other exercise on the digestion of air, you will realize that these 2 exercises are linked together. I'm not sure if I should read the next one. It's quite long. It's actually the next one. Man's atmosphere does not necessarily have the shape of a sphere. It constantly changes its form. In times of strain, of threat, or danger, it becomes stretched out in the direction of the strain. Then the opposite side becomes thinner. Man's atmosphere takes up a certain space. Within the limits of the space, it is attracted by the organism. But beyond a certain limits, particles of the atmosphere become torn off and return no more. This can happen if the atmosphere is greatly stretched out in one direction. I'll email or I'll send this, the rest of this through. basically, we have an atmosphere around our body that's 5, 6 feet, a meter, meter and a half. And whenever we get into a state of emotional identification, our atmosphere is ripped away. Whenever we get upset, our thoughts are jumbled. We're angry. We're in some kind of a state. Our atmosphere is dispersed. Whenever we are in any kind of state of identification, our atmosphere is drawn to what we are identified with. Most people walk around in life living a life where their atmosphere is constantly being pulled away, where their atmosphere is constantly being dispersed. And it's very important for us to learn to maintain a collected state, to imagine and become aware of the atmosphere surrounding ourselves, and to keep the atmosphere within very specific limits. I've always spent more time in a collected state. For a lot of my life, I was very much an introvert. I was very shy. So I spent a lot of time, in a very calm state, in a very quiet state. I didn't realize consciously what I was doing. But as I've learned this exercise, I can walk down the street and be aware of my atmosphere. And then I can be aware that certain thoughts pull me right out and pull my atmosphere out. And certain obsessions and certain different things can just disperse my atmosphere, or I can keep it around me. And keeping it around me, one of the things I have to do is really stop the internal dialogue, the associative chatter in my head brain. I've got to be very present in my body, in my perceptions, in my feelings. In other words, when I self-remember, I'm very much in that collected state. When I stop self-remembering and think about what that person did or what I've got to do with later in the day or whatever, it gets dispersed. And to keep on pulling it back in times of deep emotional turmoil. If someone yells at you and you just think, why did they yell at me, and how could they, and what's going on? Your atmosphere is dispersed. So any kind of negative emotion that is based on the process of identification, which is probably 99% of the negative emotions that we experience, they just burst the atmosphere. They dissipate it. Any kind of associative thinking bursts it. When we reflect and think too much about other people, it bursts that atmosphere. And, Mr. Gurdjieff, as he was talking to Miss Gordon, one of the ladies of the rope in Paris around 1934, he told her just to begin with her leg, to imagine her leg having the atmosphere and holding it within the leg. Just give me a second now. I'm going to go back to the screen. And I think we keep on losing. I'm not sure if Iman and Reggie are still there, but we've lost their images. Here comes Ben. There's Reggie.
Yes, I am here listening.
Oh, you are here. Okay, good. It just showed me that your microphone was off, so I didn't know if I'd lost you.
Yeah, because I'm, surrounded with my family, so I didn't want, to have any noise.
Okay, that's okay. Meeting number 29. Thursday, the 3rd of August, 1944. And this part that I'm going to read is actually in the text that's available online, just right now. So, Gurdjieff, your decision is not strong. You must decide many things. You must put yourself in a quiet state, relaxed, and in this state, settle your task. You try it 10 times, 100 times. You fail. You continue. You take trouble. Little by little, you train yourself and you achieve it, but not in one effort. This is very little thing, and it is the most important. Remember yourself consciously. That is to say, by your own decision. To remember oneself and at the same time collect oneself together to penetrate deeply into one's very self. These then are the conditions. If you cannot continue for a long time, try it for a short time. And then, there's some more dialogue in the talks, and then it comes after, when you have quietened your associations, only then begin the exercise consciously with all your attention. Why is that font different than this font? I'm not sure. Then it skips down, and this exercise is taken out. This exercise does not appear, for instance, in the text I think I sent you on the meeting notes, Paris Talks. But as I said, a friend of mine had an unredacted, uncensored copy. So this is the exercise as he taught on, what was the date? August 3rd, 1944, in Paris. This would have been shortly after D-Day when you think about it, but when Paris was still very much under the German occupation. So they would have landed at the beaches of Normandy in June 6th. And this would have been, I think they got to Paris in September. So, there would have been a lot, the war would have been just ramping up on the ground in that region of the world. You represent to yourself that you are surrounded by an atmosphere. Like the earth, man also has an atmosphere. And listening, try to do this. Try to imagine yourself surrounded by an atmosphere. Like the earth, man also has an atmosphere which surrounds him on all sides, for a meter, more or less, to a limit. In the atmosphere, the associations, in ordinary life, the thoughts, produce waves. It concentrates at certain places, it recedes, it has movements according to the direction which you impart to it. This depends on the movement of your thought. Your atmosphere is displaced in the direction in which your thought goes. If you think of your mother, who is far away, your atmosphere moves towards the place where your mother is. When you do this exercise, you represent to yourself that this atmosphere has limits. For example, 1.5 meters, shall we say. So a meter is approximately 39 inches, which is 3.5 feet for those American or who still work on the imperial system. So 3.5 to 5 feet. For example, 1.5 meters, shall we say. Then you concentrate all your attention on preventing your atmosphere from escaping beyond the limit. You do not allow it to go further than 1 meter or 1.5 meters. When you feel your atmosphere quietened, without waves, without movements, then with all your will, you suck it into yourself. You conserve your atmosphere in yourself in this way. You draw it consciously into yourself. The more you can, the better it is. To start with, it is very tiring. This is how one must do the exercise. And then this is where it goes back to what you can find in the texts that are available. This is how you must do the exercise. Afterwards, you rest yourself. You send the exercise to the devil. Repeat it afresh in the evening. This exercise is done especially to allow one to have a collected state. It is the first exercise. It is difficult to penetrate into yourself at the first effort. One must compel the atmosphere to remain within its limits, not allow it to go further than it should. It is the first exercise in order to have a collected state. This exercise I have given to everyone. I'm not sure why suddenly the red writing appeared on it. This exercise I have given to everyone. No one has understood what is collectedness, nor given it attention. I have seen this from the way you speak. When you have succeeded in doing that, you will be able to have a truly good state, and you will be able, by your will, to re-enter completely into yourself. When you say, I am, you will sense that you are in yourself. You will sense the whole of the body, the echo of I. And when you say am, you will have the sensation completely that you are. But if you do it for 10 years, I am, it will lead to nothing but to be a candidate for the madhouse. Do that or nothing. Begin everything again with that exercise. It is the first exercise for self-remembering.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
You know, it's just...
This is the summer. Yeah. Thank you very much again. We send us by email.
I will, send this, as a message on the board. Let me see if I can do it right now. But I mean, all the text that I read, there's a fair bit of it, but the exercise is right there. Third-ish paragraph down, but I put the Solange Cloistairs, so it's now on our message board. The document that I had,
Red.
So it's there for you.
Thank you.
Try to practice this, as he said, at home. One of the best times to practice this exercise, and it's not right here in the material that I have here, but I've read elsewhere where, they talk about when we are most collected. And that's right after we wake up, first thing in the morning. We are most collected, most within ourselves. And, as he said there, this is a very, very profound, very difficult exercise. So we start by taking baby steps. He told Miss Gordon, who had already been with him for over 10 years. She was at the Prieuré 10 years before, and she became a woman, one of the ladies of the rope. And he told her in 1934 to do this. But I mean, if you know anything about Miss Gordon, you realize that she was, she knew that Mr. Gurdjieff was very special, but, she wasn't one of his more advanced students. So maybe this is why he didn't give it to her earlier. And he told her, for her, just to begin with her leg, to imagine that her leg has an atmosphere, to imagine containing the atmosphere around her leg. And then I guess, the next thing would be to move to the other leg, to move it to the arms and the legs, to move around the body, but to imagine, to sit in quiet and to imagine that you can sense your atmosphere. I'm not sure how, long my arms are. My arms are probably 3 feet, so my atmosphere would extend a little bit further than my arms. From one side to another with my arms, it's 6 feet. So from the center to the edge of my hands is 36 inches. A meter is 39 inches, 40 inches. So a little bit more than what I can move with my arms would be my atmosphere around me. And to become aware that you have the atmosphere, to keep the atmosphere contained within that. It's like a bubble around you. And since I came across the actual text for this exercise and realized how important it is, I've been really paying attention to myself. And I notice that when my mind wanders and when I start thinking about a client or thinking about something I need to talk about or say, that my atmosphere is dispersed. But when I am in a state of self-remembering, and he said this is when we consciously bring our awareness back to ourself, when I am consciously aware of myself, of my body, when I'm consciously aware of what I can perceive, see, hear, smell, taste. That's my head brain perceptions. Constantly are consciously aware of my body, the sensation of myself, of my body, from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head, and consciously aware of my feelings. When I'm consciously aware of myself, this by definition requires the collected state. So whenever I had been self-remembering before, throughout my life, and I've self-remembered many, many hundreds of thousands of times over my life, I was by definition in that collected state. And sometimes I would only self-remember for 15 seconds, and then my awareness would be pulled away, and sometimes I could do it longer. So to be self-remembering is by definition to be in the collected state. And to be in the collected state helps us, it facilitates our self-remembering. But one thing I never knew about, one thing I never learned, was to spend time putting myself in the collected state, to self-remember, to not allow my atmosphere to be pulled away or to go to think about other people or whatever, to maintain this state, and then at the end, suck it into myself, to pull it into myself, because this is also, he doesn't say it in the exercise, but this is also how we pull in those higher particles, how we pull in those higher hydrogens that we use to feed our being. So this is not really an exercise that we can do together, so to speak, online. But it's something that, you know, you must begin to include in your daily practice. So preferably in the morning, preferably at night. I find I'm really collected. I'm in a real collected state in the morning. Mr. Gurdjieff didn't introduce this exercise. And for a lot of people who are anti-foundation, they're really upset at it because they say it was introduced by Madame de Salzmann. Madame de Salzmann and William Siegel, the man who had the eye patch over his eyes, went to Japan in the early 1960s, and they came back and they introduced an exercise into the foundation. You wake up in the morning, you know, if you have to go to the toilet, you go to the toilet, maybe you have a drink of water, and then you sit in a straight back chair, your spine erect. The way you want to have it is you want to have the base of your spine supported. You want your head to just comfortably rest on your neck, and your neck to comfortably rest on your shoulders and rib cage to comfortably rest on your spine, and your spine to comfortably rest on your pelvic bones and your hips, so that you sit straight up. Perhaps you even imagine being pulled up, connected, and just so that your spine, and you're sitting in a very straight way. And their exercise was just to sit this way. They didn't give a lot of directions to it, but they would recommend to the members of the Gurdjieff Foundation that after you wake up, you know, if you have to go to the toilet, like I said, get a drink of water, whatever, do that, and then sit in this collected state, because more of our centers, more of our presence is in this collective state, and we're more together first thing in the morning. And then when we begin our day, we get being pulled apart. Our thoughts go this way, our feelings go that, and other things enter. So in the morning, put yourself in the collected state. Imagine the atmosphere, a meter, meter and a half, 4 to 6 feet around you. Become aware of your atmosphere. Become aware of how sensing your body from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head. Becoming aware of the sensation of self. Becoming aware of your breathing. Holding, keeping your emotions calm. Imagining that your emotions and your thoughts can create ripples in this atmosphere, create real deep waves in this atmosphere. And so to keep your thoughts calm, to keep your emotions calm, to imagine this atmosphere as tranquil as it can be, to be in that collected state with the atmosphere around you. And then when you're ready to get up and begin your day and do other things, or if you can do this throughout the day, just as good, just breathe it into you, suck it into you, and then go out and do what you have to do in the world. And he also, if you notice how he said, start by doing this alone. Start by doing this during those quiet times, and then take it out into the world. So I like to self-remember. My favorite place to self-remember is when I take the dog for a walk. I like to get into that collective state. I stop my associative mind. I actually start by listening. So to what I can hear, the traffic, the birds, the breeze. Then I become aware of what I can see. Then I become aware of what I can smell, what I can taste. Then I sense my body and I become aware of my feelings. And so it's like I pull myself back into myself. One of the characteristics of self-remembering is to be aware of receiving the impression as you receive the impression. So to become aware of the eyes and what comes into the eyes. Paul Beidler talked about this. Let me see if I can, I should be able to find this fairly quickly.
Butler. Butler. How do you spell butler?
Pardon?
How do you spell butler?
Butter?
Butler, the guy you're looking for.
Oh, Beidler.
Beedler.
Beidler. You've gone to endlesssearch.co.uk, Northern Forest. I talked about him a bit before, how I have this woman who's coming to my Tuesday night groups who spent 15 years driving down to Northern Forest in Pennsylvania back in the early 80s to the 90s, every 6 weeks with a group of people. And she studied directly under Paul Beidler, who was a student of Mr. Gurdjieff. He was actually studying architecture in Paris in 1923 when he heard about the Prieuré and went and lived there, and was a lifelong student of Mr. Gurdjieff until Mr. Gurdjieff died. But just give me a second. Start screen. Okay. So, Beidler talked about, impartial or neutral attention exercises. These are associated with assimilating third being food. That's the impressions, our third being the octave of impressions. And they can be practiced sequentially or simultaneously. And these, so one can attend sensing to all of the sensations of the body, taking in all sensations without identifying or labeling the impressions as pleasant or unpleasant. And we can get caught up. You see a car accident happen, your vision pulls you in that direction, and you won't be able to self-remember. But when I self-remember when I'm walking outside, it's not really a sightless gaze. It's just a full panorama. It's to be aware of everything, all of the movements, to open myself up to the full range of sight. So here he says, sightless gaze. One attends to one's total visual field as one panoramic field of light, taken in everything without identifying or labeling the impressions as things or actions, good or bad. When I was in the Bennett group, he really emphasized the need to become aware of what we can see visually in the peripheral of our vision. So to be aware of the periphery of our vision, but not just the periphery, to try and become aware of everything that is being received by our visual sight. We've got 10 million photoreceptors in our eyes. We've got a foveal in our eyes that allows, if you hold your hand out and stick your thumb up, the foveal vision is about that size of your thumb. And then the rest becomes more and more peripheral. But the sightless gaze is to be aware of everything, all movement, all form. This is something I like to practice when I'm outside. So I see all the cars. I see there's a coffee shop down the road. I see all the people moving, their arms. I'm not focusing on anything. Sightless sound. One attends to one's total oral field as a panoramic field of sound, taking in everything without identifying or labeling the impressions as things or actions, good or bad. I was sitting outside at the coffee shop yesterday with someone who's actually a member of the Gurdjieff Foundation, and they were describing an experience to me. And in that moment, I was really trying to hear all the voices around me, the sound of all of the traffic, the sound of the birds, the sound of everything that I could hear in that particular moment. So rather than focusing just on a single voice, I tried to open my attention, my hearing to everything. And this is what I do when I self-remember. When I do the sightless gaze, I try to be aware of everything that I can perceive, all movement, all shape, all form. The sightless sound, everything, or the soundless sound, the smellless smell. One attends to all odors, taken in every odor without identifying it or labeling the impressions as things or actions, good or bad. So just to smell, again, we're not even aware that there's a center to our smell and there's a peripheral dimension to our smell. And then the other is the tasteless taste, to attend to all taste impressions in your mouth. Now, I actually have an exercise that I created many years ago, even though the exercise is 2015. Let me see if I can just find it. I call it mindful perceptual exercises. And I believe, let me find out. Yeah. And in a sense, I mean, I what I did was when I created my self-remembering series on YouTube, it's a series of 7 10-minute inner exercises that will teach you how to do basic self-remembering. What I did was I reverse engineered my own experience. Number 5, I just ended up doing mindful perceptual exercises. That's what I call it. So, you know, you sit there, for instance, and look right at the center of your sight, and then you become aware of everything around you in the peripheral. You sit there and become aware of the center of your vision, and then you become aware of what's above you and what's behind you and what's around you. I'm just pasting a link to the group right now of that exercise, mindful perceptual exercises. So it's on the message board for on Facebook the link to that particular exercise. It's number 5 in my self-remembering series. And it's just a series of exercises, to become aware of what you can hear above, behind, below, in front, what you can smell above, to the side, below, to the side, what you can see. I don't think I use taste. I might use taste. I don't think so. But it's, looking, listening, and smelling, trying to expand our awareness. And, reading what Beidler said about that process. He calls it sightless gaze and whatever. And it's just very similar to what I've been doing. I just gave it a different name. I just, hopefully, I don't know if I did it right, endlesssearch.co.uk. I've just shared that to the group. I don't know why it's not showing up. Endlesssearch.co.uk. This site, endlesssearch.co.uk. I'm going to put it on the message. I don't know. There. On the message board. This is where the Beidler exercise, sightless gaze, and everything is. The endlesssearch.co.uk, it's actually put up and run by someone who was from Toronto. His name is Ian McFarlane. And when I talk about my friend Fran, who's joined my weekly Tuesday evening group, Ian McFarlane was the central dominant presence in Toronto. So they would meet twice a week, sometimes in parks. And then as a group, they would drive down to Northern Forest every 6 weeks to spend the weekend with Paul Beidler. I say Beidler, but she said his name is Beidler, Paul Beidler, at Northern Forest in Pennsylvania. And then they would drive back, and then they would meet once or twice a week together here in Toronto. And they did this for 15 years. Now, Ian McFarlane has subsequently moved to the UK. So that's why the website is endlesssearch.co.uk. But he was the person in Toronto who Fran knows very well. He was sort of the leader of the Toronto group. Though back then, Paul Beidler was the actual group leader. And they would go to Paul Beidler every 6 weeks. So there's some information there on that website. The holy the holy affirming, moving up the leg, holy denying, pelvis, upper leg, down the leg. Those are all come from her. They come from the Beidler website, Endless Search. So these are all different things that we can begin to engage in. Okay, I've been talking a lot. We've got about another 10 minutes. Just try and become aware of your body. Just try to focus on your body, to try to sense your body, to become aware of your breath, to become aware of the air flowing in through your nose, nasal cavity, back of mouth, throat, vocal cords, right down into your lungs and back out again. And then try to become aware of your body breathing. Try to become aware of your whole body breathing. Try to become aware of your toes, your feet, your ankles, moving up your legs, your lower legs to your knees, up to your hips. Try to become aware of your hands and your hips, moving up your torso, up your lower arms, to your midriff, your elbows, the middle of your back, moving up your chest, your upper arms, your upper back, up to your shoulders. Try to become aware of your body from the bottom of your feet all the way up to your shoulders. Try to move up your neck, up your head, to the top of your head. Try to bring yourself back into your body. This is the beginning of the collected state. It starts with our physical body. To be aware of our physical body, to be aware of the sensation of self. And then to become aware of what we can see, but without judgment, without allowing our attention to be captured in any way by anything we see, to become aware of the totality of what we can see, and then to become aware of the totality of what we can hear, the totality of what we can smell, without identifying, without focusing on one aspect, focusing on the whole, the complete dimension of what we can see, what we can hear, what we can smell, to become aware of the complete dimension of the taste in our mouth, while sensing our body, while being aware of our body from the bottom of the feet to the top of our head, aware of the air that is touching the skin, the hair on our head, the clothing that's touching our body, the way gravity is pushing our body down, the awareness of the back of our legs, sort of on the seat, the awareness of our spine, the awareness of our rib cage, our pelvic bones, the bones in our body, to be aware of our body, to be aware of our body breathing, to be aware of our body breathing, and the full sightless gauge, the full range of it, all the light coming in through our eyes, the sounds coming in through our ears, the smells coming in through our nose, the tastes coming in through our tastes, and try to be aware that we actually have this atmosphere around us, almost like a circle, like a globe, like an egg. And imagine you can sense your atmosphere, a meter, meter and a half, 40 to perhaps 50 inches outside of our body, 4 feet, 5 feet, 5.5 feet. Be aware of your atmosphere. Be aware of yourself contained within that atmosphere. Imagine, sense, feel that containment in your atmosphere. Really become aware of your atmosphere surrounding you. And then I'm going to count to 3. And when I get to 3, I just want you to imagine sucking that atmosphere into your body. So become aware of this atmosphere around you. Be very contained. Keep everything in you, your thoughts and feelings, the associations. Keep your body, the sensations, all very contained, very still, very quiet, very calm. Perhaps you even imagine that your atmosphere is like this ocean. It's like a tranquil pond without any movement, still, quiet, serene, calm, extending, a meter, meter and a half outside of you. Sense this atmosphere, sense, see, become aware of it. And then 1, 2, 3, breathe it into yourself. Feed your being. Breathe these higher particles into yourself. In the last few minutes, any comments, any questions? The last week and this week, these are very, very important information contained here. Very, very important exercises to understand. In a sense, all the rest is like postscript. How we do it, and all the other exercises such as distinguishing personality from essence and going back through our childhood and figuring out various things are all just postscripts. They're ways of finding out where we leak the energy that we need to maintain this state, and where we leak the energy that prevents us from being in the collected state, that prevents us from remembering ourselves, that prevents us from growing our being.
Thank you very much. Fantastic.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Any last minute questions? I've gone through it quite explicitly, so there's just
what the differences are between meditation and hypnotherapy, and what is better and what is worse for what?
In a couple of minutes. They're vastly different. And the meditative state is also a trance state.
Mm-hmm.
So when you enter into the meditative state, you are actually quieting your conscious mind down and entering more into the subconscious, subterranean regions of yourself. But meditation is really done to be in the collected state. It's to draw your atmosphere into yourself, whereas hypnosis and hypnotherapy serves a very different purpose. Hypnosis is best done with a hypnotherapist outside leading you. I can go into a very deep hypnagogic state. Once I'm in that state, the ability to do any kind of inner work becomes almost impossible. I need
Mm-hmm.
someone outside me saying, and now I want you to do this. And I need someone outside me feeding me suggestions, because I can't do that in that state.
Mm-hmm.
So hypnotherapy is using these trance states, using these states, getting people into these states in order to begin to bring them into a wholeness, bring them into a sense of completion, in order to accentuate certain suggestions, in order for them to go through certain inner experiences, going back to childhood and various different things.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it's a very complex thing for me to explain.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, for those of you who have read Beelzebub Tales to His Grandson, and because I'm a hypnotherapist, I read the book completely different than most people. You have to have the training and the skills to understand what he's saying. I had been practicing hypnotherapy for over a decade when I finally made it fully through the book. And there's a chapter on hypnosis and a chapter as Beelzebub as a professional hypnotherapist. And he talks about the hypnotic state very, very deeply. Now, there's a chapter and there's references to Ashiata Shaimesh, who changed the world. I fully believe that Ashiata Shaimesh was a hypnotherapist, and he changed the world through the use of hypnosis. And in particular, there's one specific quality that he was able to engender through the use of hypnosis, which is called remorse of conscience. And between Beelzebub Tales and the Paris wartime meetings, the understanding of what remorse of conscience is profound. There's an exercise, a very advanced hypnotic exercise called forgiveness of others. And forgiveness of self is the second version. These are halfway along the way to remorse of conscience. They're you know, the hypnotherapists have stumbled around in the dark, and they've come up with these two profound and powerful applications of hypnotherapy. But you take it one step further, and it leads, and you can engender the state of remorse of conscience, of organic shame, of remorse, bring them together as remorse of conscience. And if you understand how to use them in the hypnotic state, you can repair your past. But this is something that I will be discussing. It will be the topic of meetings, but much more in the future, you know, in a few months from now. I want to work through some of the more preliminary exercises. This is like the creme de la creme, the use of remorse of conscience to go back and experience the pain that we caused other people, to experience the consequences of our actions so as to repair our past. And hypnosis is the way, I believe, that we do this. And it's all there in Beelzebub Tales. It's all there in some of the talks that he gave to people in Paris. But again, this is just a brief introduction now. It's a much more complex topic than, you know, a few minutes can give me.
Who is Ashiata Shaimesh? Because
Ashiata Shaimesh, we don't know. Mr. Gurdjieff hinted he was still to come. He was in the future, but he came before Babylon, so he was in the past, and we don't know. Sometimes Mr. Gurdjieff even once said, "I am Ashiata Shaimesh," and at other times he implied that Ashiata Shaimesh was an actual messenger from above who had been here on the planet and that we could call to help. And at other times he implied that Ashiata Shaimesh was still to come. This is one of those big questions in the Gurdjieffian community. Who was Ashiata Shaimesh? What was Ashiata Shaimesh? What techniques did he use? One of the things in Tales Mr. Gurdjieff said was that he changed humanity without teaching them a thing. So he wasn't a teacher. He affected and changed people in other ways. This is why I think he was a hypnotherapist. And I think, you know, if you read Tales in a certain way, you can begin to get a sense that maybe he was a hypnotherapist and he used that to help people. But it's my own conjecture. I've argued a lot with people who say I'm wrong, but they're not hypnotherapists and they don't understand that dimension that's contained in tales.
And maybe last question is, I think I heard another person, Mola Nasser
Nasser-Eddin, yeah.
So, and then who is he?
He's
because I have
Mullah is both a fictional character and a non-fictional character.
Okay.
Mullah Nasser-Eddin is a very, very famous person in Central Asia. You know, I have friends who are Iranian, and when I talk about Mullah Nasser-Eddin, their jaw drops, and you know about him. But there are so many stories that are actually ascribed to him. But Mullah Nasser-Eddin was actually a real historical person. And this is where it gets, you know, synchronicity and spook. Because you've probably heard of the Sufi poet Jalaluddin Rumi, the poet Rumi, the Persian poet. The Mongols were invading Persia, which is Iran, and so he left and he moved to Turkey. And he lived in an area, Rumi comes from Roman, so he lived in an area in Turkey, and Rumi lived in an area in Turkey. He lived in a city, Konya, and was alive at the very, very same moment that the historical figure, Mullah Nasser-Eddin, lived. And Rumi was a poet. The whirling dervishes and everything, they're all Mevlevi Sufis. That is all traced back to Rumi. Whereas Mullah Nasser-Eddin, he was a jurist, so more like a lawyer or whatever. And he started out as a historical person, but became a fictional person. And, you know, so he, you know, Mr. Gurdjieff quotes something like 60 sayings of Mullah Nasser-Eddin, and some of them he probably picked up, and some of them he may have invented. You know, like there's all these stories of Mullah Nasser-Eddin, and they always have multiple meanings. There's a surface meaning, there's a deeper meaning, and you can go online and you just type in, you know, Mullah Nasser-Eddin, and there are a number of different spellings, and you can come across all sorts of stories about him. And these are all Sufi stories in some respect. They have layer upon layer upon layer of meaning. And the first meaning is not the meaning that you should take. And some of them have 3 or 4 different meanings. So he started out as a historical person, but he became a mythical person. So yeah, it's hard to explain who he is, but you know, he was always pictured riding backwards on his donkey. You know, I wanted to go somewhere and the donkey wanted to go the other place, and this is how we compromised and things like that. But at any rate, it's just after 12.
Yes.
You know, thank you for those who could join. And the, you know, Francis was stuck in traffic. Ian's probably now in the air. Martin's on a boat. Hopefully he's landing in Virgin very soon. So, you know, they were all, you know, in transit, so to speak. Okay. Thank you very much. And collective state, practice it. And we'll meet again next week. Take care.
All right. See you.